So we are talking about the 2015 movie Baskin. Now before I get onto this movie, I will have to say, looking at the some of the poster work here, is literally the same poster that we've seen for a British horror film, A Date with Ghosts, and neither of these images are really anything to do with either of the films. They must be going to generic horror marketing R Us to get their kind of promo images. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about Baskin. This is a Turkish film, and thus it is spoken in the Turkish language, so you will have to read some subtitles, unless you are Turkish of course. And this one is directed by Can Evanrol, and is a pretty spooky and gory horror film. Now the basic premise here basically focuses on a group of policemen as they are basically answering a distress call from one of their colleagues, and it takes them to a kind of a dark and dreary part of town, and they get involved in an accident and have to investigate a kind of local structure, and there they find a hellish nightmare that could even be hell itself. So let's talk about Baskin. Now in case you're wondering, Baskin translates to raid, but this is nothing like the kind of the raid movies that we've seen in regards to the kind of the martial art films. There's no martial arts in these films, but it's probably as violent in a different way. So like I said, if you're not a fan of subtitles or foreign films, that's going to be a strike against you in this one. But if you can kind of get past that and you do enjoy kind of foreign films, then I would definitely suggest checking this one out if you are a horror fan. If you are kind of more of a casual moviegoer, this might not be the one for you, because it does get a little hardcore in places. So what I liked about this film, first of all, I got to talk about the casting. The casting here is fantastic. The main cast obviously comprises of this group of policemen. They're all very good. Now it's always a little bit difficult for me to kind of judge acting when it comes from non-English speaking actors, because I can't really tell how they're delivering their lines and things like that, but to me it seemed great. They kind of look the part of the policeman. But I really want to talk about some of the other casting in regards to some of the other actors that you'll see in this movie that kind of maybe are the kind of the antagonists to a certain degree. They have some quite unique looks, and I think it really fits with this kind of this very kind of dark story that you've got here. Even the kind of these sort of traveller types that we sort of see in the kind of the first half of the movie, then we go in the second half of the movie, we'll kind of see these darker characters that will kind of come into the story, and they look pretty scary, and there's no prosthetics here, if you know what I mean. If you are a gorehound, then you will like this movie. This movie is quite gory, particularly in the second half of this film. This film really is a story of two halves, I have to say, and I'll come on to that again. The other thing I really want to talk about, again, this kind of circles back to the acting here, is one thing I really liked about this film is the way the policemen react to things, because I find in a lot of horror films you never really see what appears to be true terror. If you were to see some of these things, if you were to see a ghost or a demon or some kind of human sacrifice, how you would generally react, it will be pure terror and kind of panic. And I think in a lot of these horror films, you'll just, people scream and they shout, but it doesn't really ever seem real. This one seems real, so I really did like that. And I think certainly the first half of this film, it kind of has this fantastic kind of like suspense building. It's a little slow, I'll be honest with you, so sometimes this film, when they start investigating this kind of like this large building, obviously in the dark, and they kind of uncover certain kind of evidence of dark goings on, shall we say, it's genuinely creepy. There's such a fantastic unsettling atmosphere here. It's brilliant. Now we move on to the kind of the slightly more negative side of things. Like I said, this film is a film of two halves, and when we kind of get in the second half, it changes kind of tact a little bit, and is literally, I guess you would call it a torture film to a certain degree. So there's less of the kind of the eeriness, there's less of the kind of the sense of foreboding, and it's more of a gore film from that point on. Now this is where you'll see more of the kind of the other characters, and like I said, I did like the castings. There's certainly parts of that second half of this movie I liked, but to me it kind of lost a little bit of steam, and unfortunately wasn't quite as interesting to us, I didn't think, as the first half, which I felt really gave such a fantastic kind of promise to this film. It's not bad, don't get me wrong, but I just didn't feel it quite lived up to maybe the kind of the promise of the first half. Although there is a lot of gore here, and it's very well done, and like I said, I like the casting and some of the characters here. When it's all said and done, then you look at this film as a whole, the story is quite simple. So if you're expecting something a little bit more of a complex sort of story with kind of twists and turns, and there are little, I suppose, but generally speaking, the story is actually quite simple, and that's pretty much it. So and then when you come to the end of this film, I have to say, I found the end a little unsatisfying. I think some people will like it, but for me personally, I found it a little unsatisfying. But generally speaking, the positives of this film way outweigh any kind of negatives. This is a very well made film. I think everyone involved here, and this was their first film, the director's first film, I believe, although it was adapted from a short of this kind of the same name. But it's really great. It's a really great, well made film. It's confidently shot with a fantastic, foreboding sense of atmosphere. If you are a horror fan, you like spooky films, you like gore films, you're going to like this one. If you are not a fan of gore films, you will not like this one, however. But overall, I enjoyed this film. It's definitely worth checking out. I am going to give this movie a fairly high mark. I'm going to give it 7.5 out of 10. Definitely worth checking out. Have you seen it? What do you think of it? Leave a comment, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.